Could the Nintendo Switch 2 actually surpass the Nintendo Switch 1 when it comes down to the sales and everything overall scope and scale? Well, it looks like some people are actually starting to think that when it comes to developers, because in a recent interview with WCCF Tech, there was a developer from Virtuos. They are a highly touted port studio. They've worked on a lot of different stuff. They're also a support studio as well. Check out the list of games here, guys. Horizon Zero Dawn, Heavy Rain, LA Noire, Dark Souls Remastered, Astral Chain, Cyberpunk 2077, Outriders, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Hogwarts Legacy. I talked about this interview that they did just a bit ago in one of my videos, but I wanted to hone in on one thing that was said here, and people are starting to talk a little bit, especially with the hot start that the Nintendo Switch 2 is off to. Could the Switch 2 actually surpass the Nintendo Switch 1 in sales, or even get near it? I already went on record saying I'm not so sure if that's going to happen. It's going to be tough because there's only 3 systems in the history of the video game dedicated console market that has ever hit 150 million units plus. The Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo DS, and the PlayStation 2. So it's more likely that it's not going to happen. But if you look at a lot of the things that are lining up, I'm going to break down how it could happen overall because of a number of different things. I want to first get into what Mr. O'Grady had to say. He is the technical director at Black Shamrock. That is a virtual subsidiary, and they contributed to Back 4 Blood, Starlink Battle for Atlas, Grounded, Destroy All Humans, Kerbal Space Program 2, The Outer Worlds, Spacer's Choice Edition, and Marvel Midnight Suns. So let's get into what he had to say just about the big success of the Nintendo Switch 2, selling 3.5 million units in its first 4 days. Quote, given the phenomenal success of the Switch, expectations for the sales performance of Switch 2 were already quite high. Nintendo has a huge pool of loyal fans, but alongside that, the handheld gaming market is growing right now, and I'm not talking about smartphones. The original Switch, along with the Steam Deck and other high-quality handheld gaming rigs, has contributed to growth in this area. Gamers increasingly want AAA games on the go, and so I think we will see the Switch 2 surpass its predecessor. This is precisely because it is a Nintendo console renowned for innovation and its unique gameplay experiences, and because it meets the growing demand for gaming on the go, offering indie gems, Nintendo exclusives, and now AAA blockbuster titles. Now, this was almost seems like he wrote this down beforehand, but I'm guessing he's just saying it off the top of his head overall. But this was a lot of the stuff that I was talking about before the Nintendo Switch 2 even launched. And I kind of wanted to hone in on a number of different things here, kind of a little bit outside of what he had to say, but it's interesting to see a developer say this early in the life of it. So let's just talk real quickly about the sales right now. Obviously, the Nintendo Switch 2 is off to a faster start than the Nintendo Switch 1. The Nintendo Switch 2 has sold 3.5 million units in its first 4 days, and based off of some estimates that we have from analysts out there, it has sold anywhere near from 5.4 to 6 million units in about the first month, a little bit before that. So we could be seeing 6 million units plus already for the first month. That is significantly faster than the Nintendo Switch 1, which sold around 2.7 million units in its first month. So the Nintendo Switch 2 already has a huge jump on the Nintendo Switch 1. Although, of course, it's just starting out. Obviously, it's a sequel to a really popular brand, so it could just be like, hey, look, a lot of people are rushing out to get it. Things could slow down compared to the Nintendo Switch 1 over time, and that's based off of a variety of different factors, mainly economic conditions. So economic conditions are going to be a big telltale sign of what is going to happen right now. If Nintendo can hold on to the $450 price range or the $500 bundle that they have with certain games, and they can hold to that, and tariffs or inflation or other things don't mess that up, I think economically they're actually set up to do really well in comparison with the Nintendo Switch 1. And while a lot of gamers online made a lot of noise about the price of the Nintendo Switch 2, and Nintendo's even been cognizant and worried about that, if you look at what people are paying for in today's day, $450 is definitely not a small amount of money. But if you're looking at the best tech or good tech with a handheld hybrid platform or just video games in general, it's actually priced pretty competitively overall with other systems. If you want to get a Steam Deck, for example, that's going to run you $400 for a system that's not as strong, doesn't come with the dock, doesn't come with 2 controllers as well. So you get a little bit more of value when it comes to simply what's in the package overall. Then if you're talking about some of the other portable handheld hybrids, I mean, those are going up to $700, $800, up to $1,000. So those aren't going to be a factor at all in comparison to the Nintendo Switch 2. So in my opinion, at least, even if you compare it to Xbox and PlayStation with the recent price increase with the Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S, I don't even see those in stores anymore. So really, you're just looking at the PlayStation 5, which is still selling good. But overall, if you're looking at it, people do want what Mr. O'Grady had to say, even going back to the Nintendo Switch 1, because the Switch 1 was $350 with that OLED model, and people were snapping that up. So if you look at what people are probably thinking in the economic market, everything has essentially went up in price. Everything's more expensive, from food to housing to everything at this point. So I think that there is a natural progression that people are thinking that, hey, okay, I spent $350 or I spent $300 a number of years ago on this Switch 1. Switch 2 is better, so I am going to have to pay a little bit more. And I think that's the reason why people consistently are going out there and buying it despite the higher price tag. Now, once again, the important thing is here, when it comes to the economic conditions, is that Nintendo can hold to that price overall and not have too many $80 games compared to $70 or other prices as well. So we'll see what happens there. But right now, I think that they're actually set up pretty good in comparison to other platforms, considering what the Nintendo Switch 2 does as a portable system and a home console, all in one package right there from the get-goes. But the next thing that we're going to talk about is absolutely the most important, and that is the games. The games are the biggest thing when it comes to how the Nintendo Switch 2 can eventually surpass the Nintendo Switch 1. But what's also important is all of you guys that are not subscribed to the channel, hitting that subscribe button, hitting that like button, and clicking that notification bell to get my videos as soon as they drop. Now let's go in and jump into this, because games are going to be a vital and pivotal role when it comes down to it, and not just having games that are okay or just all right, that's not too bad, but actually games that surpass what Nintendo's done on the Nintendo Switch 1, and with the frequency and quality that we know with it. Now, the biggest issue that we saw with the Nintendo Switch 1 was the fact that a lot of Nintendo, even first-party games, had issues performance-wise and had some problems here and there. And yes, those still sold well. Everything still did really good. But with the Nintendo Switch 2, you have a realistic chance here, especially with what we saw with Mario Kart World starting out with stuff like Donkey Kong, Bonanza, Metroid Prime 4, Beyond, Pokemon Legends, ZA. Yes, some of these are on Nintendo Switch 1, but the fact that they're going to be enhanced, run better, look better, and just be better to play overall on the Nintendo Switch 2 is super appealing and a good thing for Nintendo first-party software that's going to be pulling the weight of the system. Now, of course, third-party software is going to come in, and that is going to help sell the system as well, especially as Japanese developers start making some games, big-time titles for it. I think we could see unique games built specifically for the Nintendo Switch 2 from Japanese developers that are going to help sell the system. But when it comes to Nintendo's first-party and even AA games, this is going to be a dramatic jump above when it comes to technical specifications and potentially even gameplay ramifications with a lot of games. Games like Donkey Kong Bonanza probably wouldn't be even possible on the Nintendo Switch 1 to the level that they're doing it. That is the type of stuff to where if you take like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, for example, or Donkey Kong Country Returns, Donkey Kong Country Bonanza could outsell both of these games combined overall if you're looking at it, considering how ambitious and awesome it is. It looks like it has the difficulty of a Donkey Kong game, or at least customizable in some sense, but it has a bunch of new charm and tech that creates new gameplay experiences that can push some of their franchises to new heights overall. We're seeing what's happening with Metroid Prime 4, for example, having 4K, 60 frames per second, having up to 120 frames per second as well in performance. That's going to be pushing things to the limit when it comes to what Nintendo usually does in their games. Stuff like Kirby Air Riders could be awesome when it comes to using all of the extra horsepower that they have to surprise and delight players with a really fun Kirby racing experience. And it's going to go on and on. Look at even like Pokemon Legends ZA, how it's going to run better and look significantly better resolution wise when it comes to running on the Nintendo Switch 2. And that type of improvement, that type of experience, I think can help drive even more people to pick up the Nintendo Switch 2, especially with some of the other games. One of my pet peeves with the Nintendo Switch 1 was having AA titles kind of run at 30 FPS at times and look kind of crusty resolution wise. I think that's also going to be something that's a thing of the past when it comes to the Legend of Heroes or Ys games or even Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma. A lot of these titles are looking and are going to run better right from the beginning on the Nintendo Switch 2, driving more people to say, okay, maybe I will upgrade at this point. Maybe I will pick up this system overall because it's doing some things that's significantly improved over the Nintendo Switch 1. So there's a variety of different things here in terms of games and how it's going to affect it. But Nintendo is kind of firing on all cylinders, even in this first calendar year that they're releasing. I think Nintendo is going to have far more games lined up when it comes to smaller games, when it comes to the AA-ish, AAA, big, massive games. They're going to have a variety of different titles to kind of just throw at waves at this system as they've gotten even more comfortable developing HD, but then also developing hybrid style ARM when it comes to the CPU, GPU of what Nintendo's doing. So that right there is going to be huge going forward with the Nintendo Switch 2, and I think that they're going to have a lot more games, especially when the big 3D Mario comes, when the big Legend of Zelda comes, the big Animal Crossing comes. These are the type of titles that could drive the Nintendo Switch 2 to new heights over what we saw with the Nintendo Switch 1, considering Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, that was a Nintendo Switch 1 game overall. Now you're going to have one uniquely built specifically for the Nintendo Switch 2, but with far better graphical capabilities than what we saw with Tears of the Kingdom when they finally got that out on Nintendo Switch 1. And of course, like I said, Animal Crossing, there's going to be a uniquely built Pokemon game. There's going to be a ton of stuff that could essentially even entice more people to pick up this system over the course of time. So I do feel that games are going to be the thing that can drive it above it, especially how these games are going to play and look in comparison to what happened with the Nintendo Switch 1 when they launched. Now, let's talk about the other things here. You also have movies, licensing deals. That stuff is big as well. The Super Mario Bros. Movie, one of the highest grossing movies of all time. But the big thing here is that so many people saw the movie and was exposed to Mario. Kids, teenagers, adults, that is also going to be huge going forward. There's a Legend of Zelda movie, and Nintendo has even stated now that they are experimenting with other franchises for movies as well. So if you start getting at least a few hit movies in there that can generate $1 billion or $500 million overall and get more people into your brands just by watching it in the movie theater or watching it on Netflix or whatever other deals that you'll have with some of these companies out there, that is going to be huge for the Switch 2 surpassing the Switch 1, because believe it or not, they didn't do that all in the Switch 1 era, really. The only thing that they actually had was the Mario Bros. Movie at the end of the Nintendo Switch 1's life overall. But starting up with the Nintendo Switch 2, we already got this next Mario movie that's going to be coming out. We've got the Legend of Zelda that's going to be coming out, and they're going to be doing other things. So I think that the movie scene and the licensing scene we're seeing with Super Nintendo World, which was more towards the end of the Nintendo Switch 1 life, all this stuff is starting right there from the beginning of the Nintendo Switch 2's life. So that's going to be a big boost as well when it comes to just, once again, getting more and more people to actually try out Nintendo Switch 2, know Nintendo's brands, know Nintendo's characters, and see what they want to do. So you guys can kind of see what I'm building at here. Massive brand with Switch 1, also Switch 2 movies and deals kind of all going in and setting into place here. I think that could really push the Nintendo Switch 2 over in terms of sales rates than the Nintendo Switch 1 over a given period of time, as long as Nintendo can keep up with all the other stuff that I'm talking about here. Now, I do want to mention one more thing here, and I think that for the longevity of the Nintendo Switch 2, I think we can definitely see Nintendo do a Nintendo Switch 2 Pro or upgrade to the current Nintendo Switch 2 system down the line. Nintendo has set themselves up better with the base hardware this time with the Switch 2 compared to the Switch 1, because if you remember with the Switch 1, yeah, they weren't getting big AAA games right there at launch. Essentially, the biggest game that they had, at launch really was nothing when it comes to third party. They didn't really have anything at all, but they had Doom 2016. They did have Skyrim, which is an Xbox 360 game, but they did use the PS4 version of the game. But it's very different from the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, where you have PS5 and Xbox Series games right there. Stuff like Split Fiction, obviously Borderlands. You have stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade that's using the PS5 version of the game overall, with the lighting and the graphics and some of the stuff in there. Not saying that it's as strong or it's going to run as good as the PS5 version, just saying that you're actually seeing more of that stuff from PlayStation 5 and looking better than what we saw with the previous systems as well, with PS4 and Xbox One. Like we're seeing that with Street Fighter 6, for example. So it's a very different scenario right there at launch. Plus they have the interesting tech with DLSS and other things in terms of efficiency and memory bandwidth and the RAM that's going to help them further along. Whereas with the Nintendo Switch 1, not so much. But I still think that in the future, Nintendo could do a Nintendo Switch 2 Pro that's going to help prolong the life of the system and get a bit more power out there for developers for certain types of games. So I think that's going to be huge, because Nintendo didn't do that with the Switch 1. There were some rumors that they were supposed to, but whatever. At the end of the day, it's just rumors. But Nintendo usually makes a stronger system with anything that they've considered portable. If you look at the Game Boy, they made the Game Boy Color. You also look at the Nintendo DS, they made the DSi. 3DS, they made the new Nintendo 3DS. So I think it's very possible in the future that Nintendo actually makes a Nintendo Switch 2 Pro to help prolong the sales of the system a number of years in. And I think that Nintendo's good for right now and overall, and a lot of developers are going to plan with the Nintendo Switch 2 in mind even years down the line. Production costs are advancing really high, and moving on to PS6 really soon, or the next Xbox really soon, just isn't going to be something that a lot of developers are going to stake all of their chips on overall and all of the development resources. So you're going to see stuff like the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, and of course the Nintendo Switch 2 still be around, and developers plan for them for years to come at this point. But I still feel that in the future, when things kind of get a little bit sketchier when it comes to the hardware and what games that are coming out, I still feel that we could see a Nintendo Switch 2 Pro. But overall, I'm looking forward to essentially just the games. That is the thing that's really going to help Nintendo sink or swim. And right now, they've got a great lineup of games, and they've got developers lined up to put out more games on the system. We're probably going to be getting a Nintendo Direct that's going to be talking about more titles as well soon here. So what do you guys think about the Nintendo Switch 2 and its chances to surpass the Switch 1 based off of all the things that I said here? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.